Hello and welcome to the Midweek Conversation of First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. My name's Jerry Hendricks, and I'm here with Pastor Teak Hamilton, and we're ready to talk about whatever, Teak. Pastor Teak.
See, I don't, does that start now or September 1st?
Well,
Can I still be just Teak?
I think
Until September 1st?
I think it's already started, because I think I heard you say in a pre-recording conversation you referred to something about a pastoral role. So I think you've already kind of kicked that off, and so
I'm worried because I've had somebody already abbreviate it PT. And I'm like, that also means part-time. So I'm a little worried.
You can't
about
let
that.
these folks get out of hand, Teak.
No, not at all.
You've got to.
And BT for Brother Teak is Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So we're in a little bit of trouble here.
Yeah.
Not a lot of good letters.
That's why we need to get out in front of it.
Right.
So that's what we're going to do today. Is
Okay,
we're gonna get out in front of all this.
All right, sounds good.
Oh man. Well, so there's several things going on. I've always enjoyed the transitions of seasonal transitions, or other things that are transitions that kind of rejuvenate and help us get kick started into things. And so we're at a neat place in our church where you'll be assuming the role of pastor September 1st,
Right.
preaching your first sermon on September 12th,
Right.
as pastor, and you're transitioning a youth ministry, and you're assuming new roles. You're doing kind of all of this stuff all at once.
All in August.
So, which is already a busy month, regardless of what pastoral role that you have.
Right. It's definitely a launch month, especially in youth ministry.
So, in terms of your mindset, knowing what you have ahead of you, what are you thinking about? What's preoccupying your thoughts as you kind of roll into this?
There's a lot, but I finally sat down Thursday or Friday, and if you go look at my whiteboard, you'll see it. I've got my 4DX one thing on there, and then I've got my 6x6, and that helped me kind of say, okay, these are the things I need to be focused on for right now, and this is where my energy and time is going to go. The big one is Wednesday nights with youth, making sure that transitions well, especially since that's a launch season and that's always your highest attendance in the fall. And then just communicating with different leadership teams and staff and things like that. Those are where my energies have gone.
Well, we have our first leadership meeting a week from today, next Monday, and so even though you won't have the pastoral role, you'll still be sitting in the big chair.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been part of the transition already, is leading some of those meetings until they found a pastor, and then it just ended up that I'm able to move into that. So those haven't been as intimidating as I thought they might be.
Yeah.
Of course, it helps when you know the people around the table. When I first came here and gave a call, I didn't know anybody around the table, and that was a big table.
Right.
Same table, but friends, so that helps.
Well, and while there's some experience with preparing those agendas, whether it was because I was gone or during the interim period, it does bring a different twist when you're kind of the one guiding that agenda from now on.
Right. Yeah, and distinguishing what is important, because you try to keep that meeting to an hour.
Yeah.
And you want to kind of get through it. So that's been one of the things that I focus on, is what is important for this moment right now, but also still looking down the road.
So one of the interesting things, I don't think I brought this up last week about you. Well, maybe we did talk about preaching responsibilities.
Okay.
You do plan on preaching, right?
I think so.
Well, because when I first came here, apparently that was something that you never gravitated toward.
Yeah, no, it's never been something I wanted to do or cared to do, because I like interaction. And you know as well as I do, when you're on stage, there's no interaction out there. And if there is, usually it's not in a way that's helpful, because it's not over the mic where everybody hears. So it's kind of a lost joke or whatever. And so Bible study's always been something I gravitated towards, and something I enjoyed doing, because you can interact with the people around the table. And you can go where the conversation takes you.
Right.
Preaching, it is very one direction, You're speaking and you're having to read the people that are there in that moment, and then you hear how it affects them later on in the week, hopefully.
Right.
And so, that's never been, and I've always had, you and Philip and even Dr. Meeks that never made me do that, would find somebody else to do it. There was one time that I said, as long as you promise not to bring that person back, I'll do it anytime you want. But that was with Philip, not with you. And so that has been nice having that, because it wasn't a calling that I felt called to as far as that goes.
But you do like the study.
I do like to study. That's something I enjoy, and I like. The new challenge for me is like piecing it together. With youth ministry, you can have a semester-long theme.
Right.
You can't do that in a sermon series. You can't do a year-long study in Isaiah, because nobody wants to deal with that. But I do like to study, and I like the background. I like the history and that kind of stuff.
So I know that there are a lot of pastors who enjoy the study and who do message series, and then they write books about those series. Can we anticipate that from T. Hamilton?
Probably not.
From Pastor T?
No, I'm not much of a writer. I enjoy, so this is weird, you and I both know school, enjoyed seminary, that kind of thing. I liked writing papers, but those don't translate well into books, or at least not books that people care about, So, no books.
Well, I know another thing that you do well is you look at something systemically, so that the sermon doesn't just stand alone on any given Sunday. Any thoughts about how that conversation continues from your vantage point?
Imagine, yes. I think a lot of the things that I'm passionate about will definitely go through there. So prayer's been a big thing for me lately. Not just in my personal life, but like really challenging us as a church to be more prayer focused on things that aren't just health and rain. And so that's what I did during your sabbatical. I talked about the Lord's Prayer, and I think that'll probably shape a lot of what I do as far as in service also, not just in the messaging, but in what we do in worship. So I think those type of things, definitely.
Yeah. So Sunday, yesterday, I announced that the last sermon series that I do here will be on New Beginnings, and one of my challenges is I want our church to embrace the newness of this opportunity and not treat it as something that's just familiar and a transition in leadership.
Right.
I talked earlier this morning about how, there was a place where I felt like me stepping in as interim kept the wheels turning, so that a pastor search team or church council wasn't having to find people to preach.
Right.
I mean, I told someone a few weeks ago that if we had gone the normal route, we probably would have just now been settling in with an interim pastor.
Right.
As far as the approach that we'd be able to have. And so when you think about, the transition of bringing someone who's currently on staff, who leaves a vacancy in one place but assumes a major role in another, I really want our church to embrace the newness of that. And I think there's several areas that I want to look at over the next few weeks, but first is going to be the church and how the church understands need and responds to need. And as you think about just the concept of new beginnings from your perspective, what are some of the things that, if you don't mind sharing, that you've already thought about in terms of the newness that you want to experience at our church?
I think anytime, and I learned this from you, change, transition used to, I didn't like it. I like things normal. I have my parking spot. That's where I
learned that after a few weeks being on the job.
Right. I mean, I only had to have you towed 3 times. No. But anytime we had a vacancy or something like that, you got excited about it. It would stress me out. David Woods leaves shortly into your tenure here and stresses me out because now there's a search process. It's a whole new way of searching for a worship leader and everything. but you always look at it as a way that we can move forward and move up. And so I actually get excited about transitions now and seeing what God can do.
Right.
And so those things don't intimidate me as much, and I'm excited about those in this new beginning, looking at what it looks like to get another youth minister in here and things like that. So I'm excited about those type of things, the new challenges, I guess. And so that's one thing. In new relationships, in youth ministry, you're with youth and families, and definitely have other relationships, but those are the ones you really focus on that you see. So there's new relationships, new approaches to that.
Yeah, I think just in listening to you so far, it does make sense how you've quickly engaged the role of pastor in your own process through staff meetings, through meetings with people so far. And I think that's one of the hardest parts, because what I mentioned yesterday was that I think you said you were busy doing the head count, but I just said Teak and I are both career youth ministers who happen to pastor churches.
Yeah.
And that was a career that we took and take seriously.
Yeah.
And we never aspired to have the lead pastor role.
Right.
And so it is different coming into that role from the youth ministry world. I believe that youth ministers are better equipped to assume that role than anybody else. But I have a very high view of youth ministers and youth ministry. The skill set that's required translates so well to the church.
Yeah, one thing I've said to people, especially outside the church, have said, are you excited about it? And I said, well, youth ministry will always be my first love.
Right.
Like, that was your first calling, and I've been 20-something years now in youth ministry, and so that's been a big part of my entire life. I mean, it's half my life now.
Right.
It's not just a part of ministry, it's my life. And so that'll always be my first love, and I'm always going to have an eye on that. But then I say, but now I get to do the role Jerry did by going up on the third floor on Wednesday nights and being that disruptor.
Don't let the word get out, man. They will shut you down.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
You can't warn them.
So I'm excited about that.
Can't fire any warning shots. You just got to show up, hit, and then hit the other side.
But that's been one of the things we talked about. Now I've forgotten where you went with what you were saying. Oh, skill set. And I'm excited about, I think I'm much more of a visual learner. And so that, I think that helps me sometimes in communication. So when you were gone one time and I did Nicodemus, being able to use some visual aids there, and those are types of things that I know work well for me because that's how I learn best. And if I'm one, then surely there's other people who learn that way. And so I think that helps. And we have to approach youth ministry with a lot of different learning approaches, and I think it'll be the same way with pastoring, just in a different dimension.
Right. I think the two things that stand out to me in youth ministry that translate well to the pastoral role, one is relationships, because if you can't be relational in student ministry, you're going to struggle.
Right.
And then the second is the spiritual formation. So it's more than just teaching and preaching, but it's actually caring enough about that part of it that you're wanting to see change and see people transformed. And so I think those are the two things that I believe a youth minister carries into it, and particularly someone with your skill set for studying and teaching. I think it translates real well to the pastoral role. And because of your familiarity with the church, you're already used to a lot of the admin things that come with pastoring a church this size.
Right. I am excited that, the studying can be in one direction.
Right.
Whereas, it's for that Sunday. Whereas with youth ministry, it was studying a lesson for a class and then a Wednesday night lesson that usually didn't link up together.
Right.
So it is nice to have that, that direction that's all one direction.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously we're all excited about this transition for our church and for you and Stacy, and look forward to helping you. I think that's the main thing that I want us to understand in terms of new beginnings, is that it's time for the church to have that sense of ownership to what goes on here, and look forward to partnering with you to see those things happen. So consider this, the first installment of these kinds of conversations with Teak over the next few weeks, as I wind down and he winds up, as I hand the baton to him. But it is something we would encourage you to pray for Teak, pray for our church as we make this transition, and we look forward to the very best in the days ahead. So thanks for opening up a little bit about that, and look forward to talking about it some more.
Excellent.
All right. And so join us this Sunday as we continue to think about new beginnings. We'll be in the book of Acts. That should be no surprise to you. But look forward to opening that up and starting this conversation over the next 4 weeks, my last 4, to have input into this process. So anyways, look forward to seeing you Sunday.
See you then.